I start the story, I want to flag one thing: the story concept. A neighbor fleeing armed pursuers in black SUVs, possessing a USB with evidence of government/official corruption, being sheltered by the narrator, involves themes that are fine for dramatic fiction. I'll write it as a personal memoir-style narrative in the tradition of Reddit storytelling/YouTube drama channels, keeping it grounded and human. The knock came at 3:17 in the morning, and I know the exact time because I'd been lying awake anyway, staring at the ceiling fan like it owed me money. My husband had left 6 weeks earlier. Not dramatically, no screaming, no thrown dishes. He just got quieter and quieter, until one Tuesday he said he needed space. And by Thursday, his half of the closet was empty. I was 41 years old, sleeping in the middle of a king-sized bed in a house I could barely afford on my own, in a suburb of Columbus that I picked because he liked the school district. We didn't even have kids. So when the knock came, I almost didn't answer it. I told myself it was probably a drunk neighbor, or someone who got the wrong house. I pulled the sheet up and closed my eyes. Then it came again. 3 fast knocks, a pause, then one slow one. Like a pattern. Like someone who was trying not to make noise but was also terrified of not being heard. I got up. I didn't turn on the lights. I'm not sure why. Instinct, maybe? Or the fact that the kitchen window faces the street and I'd heard something outside earlier? Something I'd written off as a raccoon, getting into the recycling bins again. I walked to the front door in the dark and looked through the peephole. It was my neighbor from across the street. I'll call her by the name I actually know her by, Simone. She moved into the rental house opposite mine about 8 months ago. We weren't close. We waved to each other in the mornings. Once she helped me carry groceries from my car when it was raining. She seemed private, but not unfriendly, the kind of person who minded her own business and appreciated when you minded yours. She was standing on my porch, hunched over, one hand pressed flat against my door, looking back over her shoulder every few seconds. She wasn't wearing a coat. It was 40 degrees outside. I opened the door. She pushed past me before I could say anything, grabbed my arm, and pulled me away from the doorway. "Close it," she said. "Don't turn on any lights." I closed the door. She moved to the side of the front window and peered through the edge of the curtain, keeping herself flat against the wall. Her breathing was wrong, shallow and fast, like someone who'd been running. There was a small cut above her eyebrow that had dried into a dark line. "Simone," I said, "what is going on? I need you to not ask me anything right now." She didn't look at me when she said it. She was still watching the street. "I just need 5 minutes. I need to think." I stood there in my pajamas, barefoot on cold hardwood, watching this woman I barely knew press herself against my living room wall and stare out at the dark street. Every instinct I had was pulling in a different direction. Call 911, turn on the lights, ask questions, make her leave, let her stay. I didn't do any of those things. I just waited. After about 2 minutes, she exhaled slowly and stepped back from the window. She turned and looked at me for the first time, really looked at me, and I saw something in her face that I'd never seen in a person before. Not fear exactly, but the particular expression of someone who has already run every option and found them all bad. "I'm sorry," she said. I didn't know where else to go. I told her to sit down. I went to the kitchen and got her a glass of water. My hands were shaking a little, and I almost dropped the glass, but I held it together. When I came back, she was sitting on the edge of the couch, leaning forward, elbows on her knees. "Are you hurt?" I asked. She touched the cut above her eyebrow like she'd forgotten it was there. "I fell," she said. "Running." "Running from what?" She looked at me for a long moment, and I could see her deciding something. Whatever she decided, it came with a cost. I could see that too. "My ex-husband," she said finally, "or the people he sent." I sat down in the chair across from her. She told me she'd worked for a logistics company in downtown Columbus for 4 years. Nothing glamorous. She managed vendor contracts, handled compliance documentation, signed off on shipping manifests. About 7 months ago, she started noticing discrepancies, numbers that didn't add up, invoices for shipments that, according to her records, had never actually happened. She thought at first it was an accounting error, maybe someone's spreadsheet not syncing correctly. She flagged it to her direct manager. Her manager told her she was mistaken. She went back and looked more carefully. The more she looked, the more she found. Millions of dollars cycling through dummy vendors, paperwork that had been backdated, records that contradicted each other in ways that could only be intentional. She started quietly copying files. Not because she had a plan, she was clear about that, she didn't have a plan, but because something in her gut told her she needed evidence of what she was seeing before anyone could tell her again that she was mistaken. "My ex-husband is one of the senior partners," she said. I absorbed that for a second. "He works at the same company? He's how I got the job." She took a slow sip of water. "We were married for 6 years. He's the one who told me there was an opening in compliance. At the time I thought it was him trying to, I don't know, fix things, give us more of a shared life." She set the glass down. "I understand now that that's not what it was." They'd divorced 2 years ago. She'd stayed on at the company because the pay was good and she needed stability, and he'd been professional enough about it that it seemed manageable. Then she started finding the discrepancies. "Did you tell anyone?" I asked. "Outside the company?" "I talked to a lawyer," she said. "A friend of a friend, someone I trusted. He told me I should document everything, that I had what sounded like a legitimate whistleblower case, that I should be careful." She paused. "He died in a car accident 3 weeks later." I felt the air in the room change. "I'm not saying," she stopped. Started again. "I don't know what I'm saying. Maybe it was a coincidence. It was a bad intersection, the police report was straightforward, but after that, I got scared, and I stopped talking to people about it." She'd kept the copies she'd made on a drive she kept at home, not connected to any network. She went to work, did her job, acted normal. But then last week her manager called her into a closed-door meeting and told her that there would be an internal audit of her department and that until it was complete, she was being placed on administrative leave. They took her work laptop. They had someone from IT walk her out. "They know I know," she said. "Or they suspect. Either way." Tonight she'd woken up to headlights in her driveway. Not a car she recognized. She'd watched from the upstairs window and seen 2 men she didn't know sitting in a dark blue pickup truck with the engine running. She'd waited for 20 minutes. They didn't leave. She didn't call the police. She said she'd tried that once before, after her car was broken into 2 days after the lawyer's accident, and the officer who came had been strangely incurious, hadn't taken a report, had just told her to lock her doors. She grabbed the drive, her phone, her wallet, and her keys. She'd gone out through her back door, crossed the yard, gone through a gap in the fence she knew about, and come around the block on foot. She'd seen another vehicle parked 2 houses down from hers. Also running. They had the whole street covered, she said. I didn't know what else to do. I sat with that for a moment. Outside, the street was quiet. No lights moving. Nothing I could see. "Is the drive here?" I asked. She touched the front pocket of her hoodie. "Okay," I said. "Okay. I want to be honest about what was going through my mind, because I think people assume that in moments like that you feel brave or decisive or some version of a movie hero. I didn't. What I felt was a kind of cold clarity that was almost worse than fear, a sense that whatever I did next was going to matter, that I couldn't unsee what I'd seen or unknow what she'd told me, and that I was going to have to live with whatever choice I made for the rest of my life. I thought about my husband, about how empty the house had been, about how I'd been lying awake feeling like nothing in my life mattered very much. I thought, well, okay then. I told her she was going to stay in my spare bedroom with the door locked. I told her not to use her phone, not because I was sure they could track it, but because I wasn't sure they couldn't. I gave her a phone charger anyway because the battery was at 4% and I figured having a dead phone was worse than having a tracked one. I got her a blanket and a change of clothes, a sweatshirt of mine that was too big for her but warm. She asked me why I was helping her. She asked it like she genuinely didn't know. I thought about it for a second before I answered. Because you came to me, I said, and because I've had enough of people deciding other people's problems aren't their business. She didn't say anything. She just looked at me. I stayed up the rest of the night. I sat in the kitchen with the lights off and the window angled so I could see the street, and I drank 3 cups of coffee and tried to think clearly. Around 5 a.m., the pickup truck that had been parked 2 houses down from hers slowly rolled past my house. It didn't stop. It didn't accelerate. It just rolled past, like it was looking. My hands went completely still. I hadn't realized they'd been trembling until they stopped. At 7 in the morning, I called my sister. She lives 40 minutes east, outside of Zanesville, on a property with about 12 acres and a house that isn't visible from the road. She and her husband have been off-grid curious for years and have a general policy of not asking too many questions when I need something. I told her I had a friend who needed a place to stay for a few days, someone dealing with a difficult situation, and that I'd explain more later. She said fine and gave me the gate code. I woke Simone up at 7:30. I told her the plan. I told her we were going to leave in my car, not hers, and that we were going to take back roads. She looked at me for a long time. "You don't have to do this," she said. "This isn't your problem." "I know," I said. We left at 8. I took surface streets for the first 20 minutes, doubling back twice through a neighborhood I knew well, watching the mirrors. Nothing followed us that I could see. When we got on Route 40 heading east, Simone was quiet for most of the drive, looking out the passenger window at the flat gray fields. Somewhere around Kirkersville, she said, "I used to think the system would eventually do the right thing, that if you documented everything and followed the process, someone official would take it seriously." I didn't say anything. "I don't think that anymore," she said. "I think the process only works when the people running the process want it to work." I thought about my husband again, about the process of a marriage, the way you do everything right and it still comes undone, about how many times I'd followed the rules and trusted the structure and ended up standing in an empty closet. "I think you're probably right," I said. My sister met us at the gate. She took one look at Simone, the cut above her eye, the hollow look, the borrowed sweatshirt, and didn't ask a single question. She just said, "Come inside, I'll make eggs," which is the most my sister thing she has ever said. Over the next 2 days, Simone used the drive to back up everything to an encrypted cloud account. She made a list of every discrepancy, every invoice, every date. She found a second lawyer, someone in a different city, someone no one in Columbus would know to connect to her, through a referral chain that started with a college friend of mine in Pittsburgh. She sent the files. I drove home on the 3rd day. The pickup truck was gone from the neighborhood. Simone's rental house looked undisturbed from the outside. I don't know everything that happened after that. Some of it I don't know because I stayed deliberately at a distance for my own protection and because Simone asked me to. What I know is that 6 weeks later, there was a state-level investigation announced into the logistics company she'd worked for. The announcement was buried in the business section, and most people I know didn't see it. But I saw it. I was looking for it. I texted her a single line. "I saw the news." She wrote back, "Thank you for opening the door." I've thought about that night a lot since then. About what made me get up. About what made me not turn on the lights, not call out, just open the door and let her in. I don't think I was brave. I think I was at a point in my life where I had run out of reasons to be careful, and sometimes that's what courage looks like. Not fearlessness, but having nothing left to protect that's worth more than doing the right thing. I still live in the same house. The king-sized bed still feels too big, but something is different now. and I'm not sure I can explain it except to say that the ceiling fan doesn't bother me anymore. I don't lie there staring at it. I sleep. Some nights, I think about those men in the truck, rolling slowly past my darkened window while I sat perfectly still with my coffee going cold. And I think about how they were looking for something they never found. And I think, good. I'm glad I got up. I'm glad I opened the door. Whatever comes next, I'm glad I opened the door. I think about Simone, standing at my door at 3 in the morning, and I think about how easy it would have been to not answer. That's the part that stays with me. Not the truck rolling past my window. Not the drive to my sister's place in the gray early morning. The part that stays is the 10 seconds I stood at the door before I opened it, because everything that followed came down to that. One decision, made half asleep in the dark, made before I had any information. Just a knock and a choice. I've thought a lot about what made me open it. I don't think it was courage. Not in the way people mean when they use that word like it's a personality trait someone either has or doesn't. I think it was something quieter, a kind of basic decency that was still in me despite everything that year had done to it. My marriage had ended. I'd been living alone in a house that felt like a waiting room. I'd gotten very good at convincing myself that keeping my head down was the same thing as being smart. But decency doesn't fully go away. It just waits. Simone had been smart too. She'd documented everything. She'd kept copies. She hadn't gone public until she had a second lawyer she trusted, in a different city, through a chain of people no one could easily trace. She'd thought clearly under pressure that would have made most people fall apart. That kind of clear-headedness, the ability to keep thinking when everything in you wants to just run. That's not something you're born with. It's something you build, slowly, through paying attention to the world and refusing to look away when what you see is uncomfortable. She had been paying attention for months before that night. The drive in her pocket wasn't luck. It was the result of someone who trusted her own perception even when her manager told her she was wrong. And then there's what happened after. The investigation, the business section item that most people scrolled past. I've thought about the cause and effect there. About how one woman deciding to keep a record, and one neighbor deciding to open a door, and one sister in Zanesville not asking questions, added up to something that actually mattered. None of us did anything dramatic. We just didn't quit when it would have been easier to quit. I think that's the thing I want to hold on to, not the drama of it, the dark house, the men in the truck, the early morning drive on Route 40. Those details make for a good story, but they're not the point. The point is what happens when ordinary people decide that doing the right thing is worth the cost of doing it. Simone paid a cost. I paid a smaller one. My sister paid almost nothing and still chose to help without hesitation. All of it mattered. All of it added up. I'm not the same person I was the night before that knock. I'm not sure I can explain exactly what changed, except that I stopped feeling like my life was something happening to me. I started feeling like it was something I was choosing. That's a small shift that turns out to change everything. The ceiling fan still turns. The house is still too quiet some nights, but I sleep.